Hello, this is a course on History of English Literature, and I'm your instructor, Dr. Yulia Tofanchuk. This lecture is devoted to William Shakespeare's sonnets. The sequence of Shakespeare's sonnets was first published in 1609. In their form, Shakespeare's sonnets are quite traditional. They follow the rhyme of the Spenserian sonnet, and the language is refined and artificial. The subject matter of the sonnets, however, is profound and rather controversial. The sonnets raise a number of problems, even philosophical issues, and thus remind of the deep philosophical and psychological meditations found in the plays, for instance, Sonnet 60 and 66, among others. While Petrarchan and Spenserian sonnets are devoted to the fair lady, the first 126 sonnets of Shakespeare's sequence are a hymn to the Renaissance man, who is complete, harmonious, beautiful in body, and admirable. Definitely, this is an idealized portrait. The addressee of these first 126 sonnets is unknown. He is referred to as a friend or youth, and is one of the most enigmatic figures in the history of English literature. This is largely due to the fact that he has no name and no identity, neither a certain age. There are various hypotheses as to whether these sonnets are autobiographical, and even theories concerning Shakespeare's sexuality. One edition of the sonnets is dedicated to a WH. So scholars are still banging their heads as who it could be, from a simple misspelling of the author's own name, William Shakespeare with an S missing, or yet another candidate emerging recently in the scholarly debates. The young man is praised to the skies. We learn that he is generally popular and admired. The world's eyes on him, and all tongues speak his praise. He is copied in society, and it appears natural to expect everybody to write about him, as Sonnet 32 reveals. So he is also admired and loved by the poet. The first 17 sonnets can be classified as procreation sonnets, in which the poet is trying to convince his friend to get married. The idea behind this is that the young man possesses the rare gift of beauty, and the duty of its possessor is to reproduce, to establish a family line and pass the gift to the future generations. Beauty is ephemeral. It doesn't last forever, so the young man must be in a hurry. "Shall I compare thee to a summer's day?" says the poet in Sonnet 18, suggesting that now his friend is in full bloom, while winter is used as a metaphor for losing one's looks, becoming old and ugly. When these attempts fail, the poet resorts to an alternative, which is making the friend immortal through art. Not marble nor gilded monuments of princes shall outlive this powerful rhyme. The irony here that historians are still struggling with the identity of the friend, so maybe, though remaining anonymous, he has been made immortal in this way. The sonnets tell the story of a complicated relationship. The poet complains that the youth has deserted him and there are hard periods of separation. We also learn that the friend mixes in false society and ruins his good name by a kind of sport, an obvious reference to some sexual vice. The poet is philosophical about this issue, suggesting that corruption is an integral part of beauty. Roses have thorns and silver fountains mud. There are also deeper issues to the sonnets. Change happens after Sonnet 100. There comes realization that one's sense of beauty and truth is found in oneself, not another person. "I am what I am," proclaims the poet in Sonnet 121, thus expressing a humanist outlook and the idea of Petrarchus individuus, a complete personality in whom faults and merits are inseparable. The sonnets are also a poetic war with time. The poet holds time responsible for the loss of beauty and love. Time is presented as an active, evil force. Metaphors and personification are used. Bloody tyrant, time's injurious hand, age's cruel knife, devouring time. The latter is an allusion to Cronus, father devouring his own children. These instances see time as ruthless, making nonsense of our existence. Shakespeare's rendering of time represents the dark side of humanist outlook. In a God-centered universe, man plays a less active part, and life may not be so joyful, but there is hope in the afterlife, the certainty that faith gives. Focusing on himself and life here and now, man has to come to grips with the idea of time and finality. However, the sonnets are not utterly pessimistic. They suggest a way of defeating time, such as establishing a family line or living forever in art. Out of the latter, the dual function of poetry emerges, the way the function of literature is seen today. On the one hand, it preserves the subject, my verse in which my love will live ever young. And on the other hand, poetry makes the poet himself immortal. I shall live in this poor rhyme, says Sonnet 107. The second part of the sequence is devoted to a female subject, referred to as a dark lady. These sonnets are very different in tone. If poems devoted to the young man are loving, tender, and forgiving, then poems devoted to the dark lady reveal a contradictory attitude and often contain harsh criticism. Her identity is no less enigmatic than that of the young man. Some recent scholars suggest that it could be Amelia Lanier, a 17th century woman poet of Italian Jewish descent, hence her darker complexion, hair, and eyes. And this is her portrait. But there are, of course, numerous other candidates as well.
Indeed, the lady's appearance doesn't conform to the fair lady ideal established by Edmund Spenser. If Spenser's lady has golden wire for hair and eyes like rising suns, then Shakespeare's lady has raven hair, so very dark, and morning eyes, also very dark. One can also sense a self-conflict in the poet. He knows with his mind that she is far from ideal. In faith, I do not love thee with mine eyes, for they in thee 1,000 errors note. His attitude to the lady is highly subjective. It is important what she is for him, and for him she is special and more real than the constructed beauties of standard poetry. And yet, by heaven, I think my love as rare as any she belied with false compare. The poet defines their relationship as sinful. The sonnets depict this relationship as the lady running after somebody else and the poet running after her. His inner contradictions deepen as he reveals the darkness not only of the lady's appearance, but also of her deeds. She is, as he puts it, a bay to which all men run, and the wide world's commonplace. He's actually saying terrible things about her. Yet he's conscious of the inner conflict. He can't help liking her, calling love blind fool. The lady's only virtue is that she plays music. This raises her above the young man who is indifferent to music. At one point, there is a love affair between the lady and the young man, which leaves a deep wound on the poet. Naturally, he holds the woman responsible for the affair, as the young man is too perfect in his eyes. In general, the two characters are constantly contrasted in an angel-demon dichotomy, which may even appear misogynist, as the woman represents the negative part of the dichotomy. Two loves they had, of comfort and despair, which like two spirits do suggest me still. The better angel is a man right fair. The worse a spirit, a woman coloured ill. One can speculate endlessly about the identity of the two people behind the young man and the dark lady. Yet another approach is to treat them not as two real people or two antipodes, one perfect, the other sinful, but as two sides of the poet himself, or two sides of human nature. As in every human being, there is both light and darkness, weakness and strength, male features and female features.